If you can hold on for a sec, guys. I need to call my brother. One sec. Alright, we're all good. Folks, welcome to another Malc's movie review. This is very special because I actually got a chance to go in the theater. Typically, I only get to do DVDs now and again, but at the very least, they allow me to splice in some footage for you guys. However, I actually got to go back to my roots, my Malcolm the Fat Kid review roots, and actually went to see a movie. And what a movie. I went to go see Thor, The Dark World, and man, it was great. Marvel, now I will admit, I really have been loving these Marvel movies. I don't know how they managed to find a way to make a really great film every single time, but they've been doing that. And they continue to do so again with Thor 2. But man, alright, so let's go right into it, starting with the story. Thor Dark World, takes place of course after Avengers. In it we see a much more adult, responsible Thor who's now in charge of Asgard, the entire realm, trying to maintain peace. And essentially the story is this ancient race which has been in hibernation, I guess, for some time, called the Dark Elves, finally appear. I don't know why they're called Dark Elves, because for the most part they're all white. They're all white hair, and they wear dark suits. So it's just an elf in a dark suit. So it doesn't really make any sense, but whatever. The Dark Elves, they're evil, and they have been awoken to take over Asgard, and it's up to Thor to stop them. And this may disappoint some people, but in simplicity, that's the story. But then again, even all Marvel films are kind of like that to some degree. What was the story with Avengers? Aliens try to invade Earth, and the Avengers have to stop them. Boom. There's your plot summary. However, it was really, really good here. I mean, going through it, one of the major things I liked, the feeling with as I was watching the story. Essentially, when I remember in the original Thor, where he was talking to the Natalie Portman. And he was telling her that, what you call magic, we just call basic science. But however, you don't really get to see that. Like, essentially, whenever you see Asgard, it's just essentially feels like you're in a magical place. It feels very Lord of the Ringsy. I'll just put it like that. But you finally get to see a good chunk of the high-tech sci-fi stuff that is in Asgard. As you see spaceships, you see guns, and it finally starts feeling less like a Lord of the Rings as it does. Yeah, I was feeling one half Star Wars and the other half it felt like Lord of the Rings, and it fit, like, on paper that sounds like it should be a mishmash and not work, but it works really well with this one. It was actually really, really fun watching, especially in scenes where Thor is driving one of the ships around, and oh man, it was just so much fun. And it really does work, and it adds an entire new layer to the whole Asgard and the 9 realms and whatnot. Sadly though, and this is kind of a negative part, we don't get too much explanation on Asgard. I mean, we get to see some other realms, and especially towards the end, but we don't get really an explanation. You'll see like a subtitle saying this is whatever, but you don't get any idea about it or what the place is like or what have you. So yeah, but at the very least now we're seeing more than just Asgard. We're actually going to other realms, and who knows, maybe in the future we can explore it further. The characters, however, I felt had a lot more time to shine. You still don't get like too much of, like, say, the Warriors 3, but you do get more, and you even get like a lot more fight scenes. One of them, for whatever the reason, like disappears at the very beginning of the film. It's explained why, but it feels weird that they just sort of wrote him off like that. But for all I know, there was some sort of explanation to it, like out of character. Maybe he had like some sort of commitment or what have you. But yeah, I enjoyed that. So yeah, the story really clicked. The story essentially. All right, got my handy dandy tablet here, and I can finally talk about the actors. Essentially, they all actually did a really good job here. They, for the most part, I'll go into the for most part. But essentially, I thought like all the characters really brought in for this movie, and it made it feel like a really epic experience. Especially Loki, Tom Hiddleston, once again steals the show as Loki. That's been pretty much universal. He really gets that character, and it really shows. And his the chemistry between him and Chris Hemsworth, I don't think people give enough credit to Chris as far as his portrayal as Thor. A lot of people are getting actually on his case, saying that he was interesting as a rebellious youth, a 5,000-year-old rebellious youth, but a youth nonetheless. But now that he's responsible, he's not as interesting, which is really a shame, because that's like the catch-22 with playing a good guy. You're just simply not as interesting as the villain that you're up against. But I love the relationship. They really play it up well. The relationship between Thor and Loki in general, to me, is the real story of all these Thor movies. Though you could essentially just call it Thor and Loki from now on. But just having the interactions between these two really made this film. I enjoyed every scene they were in together, and I think Tom Hiddleston even said in an interview, you could take those two characters and just put them on a farm and you would have like an interesting family drama, and that's very true. So I did enjoy their chemistry to a very nice degree. Let's see, what are some other actors in this one? Dear. But let's go on, let's see. Oh. I'm gonna cut a good chunk of this out. All right, Natalie Portman as Jane Foster. Yeah, that is the big weakness that I had with the story, is they still continue on with this love drama between Thor and Natalie Portman's character, Jane Foster. Sorry. And to this day, I still don't believe it. They met for one weekend. And I don't know what it is about this and every other love at first sight story that I've actually been okay with. Probably because of the lengths that they go for each other. There's a 2-year gap between Thor, the events of the original Thor, and this one. And we're supposed to believe Jane Foster, with a person she met just once and kissed just once, has been essentially saving herself for this one person for all this time, and it's just not believable. Thor, once again, having the same beliefs is again not believable. So yeah, I still can't get behind that relationship, and you can quote me, you can mark this down, but the Jane Foster character feels like a character that's being built up just to die at some point. It feels like a character that's essentially there just to be built up so like in Avengers 2 or 3, the big bad will stab her and kill her, and that's gonna be the next Coulson moment, so to speak, and then she'll get her own series or whatever after that, because God forbid someone dies. But no, I can't get behind the character. Probably because Natalie Portman is one of those actors/actresses that just for whatever the reason, when you see them in a role, it just feels like they're playing themselves each and every time. Like Nick Cage is essentially Nick Cage in every single movie he's in. Same thing with Natalie Portman. So that's just my take on her. Like I said, Tom Hiddleston brought it. Maybe he brought it a little too much, because when he's not, after you see him and you're seeing Loki and you're getting into his hijinks, when he suddenly goes away from the screen, it's like, oh, well, but once again, I think the film handles and carries on fine without him, and it brings some much needed depth to his character. Aside, because he's kind of coming off as a whiner, but you see like a shrivel of good in him. And that's thanks to his relationship with Rene Russo. In the story, Rene Russo actually gets a lot more, which isn't saying much. I think she got like maybe 2 lines in the original Thor, but she gets a lot more presence this time around. And she even has a pretty awesome scene at one point in the story, and her character goes in a direction I wasn't expecting him to do, which I'll leave that for you guys to discover. But Rene Russo did a fantastic job. Speaking of which, Anthony Hopkins, he was good as Odin. I mean, he was still Anthony Hopkins, and he suddenly gets angry and then rushes like that. But I still enjoyed him, and you do feel for his character also in this one, as you'll see when you go see it. Once again, go see it. Let's see, it's Christopher Eccleston. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce it. I'll like put a little subtitle here so you can see. But he plays the Dark Elf leader Malekith. This is another thing that's unfortunately kind of on the bummer side, as this character he plays really, as far as memorable villains, I don't think he'll go down as a really memorable one. As I said, in the story of Thor, the real story is always the relationship between Thor and Loki. So essentially he just plays like the antagonist, in which he's like this evil force that, they have to defeat. And I think it's fine. I mean, he doesn't really do, unfortunately, aside from being the bad guy, he doesn't do too much of anything memorable, aside from a really good fight scene with Thor later on in the show. But he'll be remembered for one thing, which once again I can't say. But so I think he did his job. But as far as he's not going to be someone like a Loki to you, so to speak. He doesn't even speak English until the end. He's like subtitled all the way through. So he may as well have been speaking Klingon for all I know. So, but for what his role was, I thought he did really well. I think it worked fine in the context of what the true story was. So I enjoyed him. But he's not gonna. I don't think he's gonna stick anywhere near as well as Loki. Jamie Alexander is Sith. Finally, Sith got she was sort of just there in Thor, but she gets a little bit more screen time. But you actually get a sense of a character, especially when you see her in this one scene, which speaks volumes. You see this one scene where she looks at Jane Foster, and you can tell just from her eyes what she's really thinking, and they really play it up well, I thought, without having to go into it. Just that one scene was perfect. You get to see her fight for a bit. You also get a sense of her character a lot better, but essentially she doesn't get as much as I'd like still. We still don't have I don't think we know how cool that character is, and that's probably not going to happen for a little while longer. But but that's just the way it is, unfortunately. Going down here, let's see if I can find any other one. Unfortunately, IMDb here doesn't go in any particular order. I thought Kat Dennings was really funny. That's another good thing I loved about this movie, is they actually they have a really good balance between the characters. Like, Kat Dennings was at the beginning and she was funny, and then they go off to Asgard, and I thought, oh, okay, well, that's it for that character. But no, they go back to her, and she's still funny, at least to me. People have all of a sudden gotten really high and mighty as far as the Marvel movies, but I enjoyed her being there. Stellan Skarsgård, otherwise known as Eric Selvig, he's there, and I'll admit, I don't know why. And this will bring me up to one negative aspect I have for the series as a whole. But essentially, he shows up. He's not well after the events of the Avengers, and and you think he's going to be there for like this major part, but it turns out no, not really. I mean, to be fair, he does invent something that does help them defeat the bad guy, but aside from that, it's like they were stretching to find an excuse to bring him in. And that brings up, I guess, another negative aspect with this franchise, Thor. There's too many characters. There's just too many. I mean, you have all the people from Asgard, and now you have all the scientists as well that you have to balance them. But essentially, the case with this franchise is they all have to be there. Absolutely all have to be there. And it's like a stretch where the writer's going back and forth, trying to fit them all in and get them to work really well. But it's sadly, a lot of times it wears on you a little thin. I mean, like I said, I thought otherwise they did a fantastic job balancing it as well as you could get. But it's ridiculous. I mean, with Iron Man, you have like really only 3 characters to worry about. Iron Man and Pepper and the bodyguard, whose name I wish I could remember, and to some extent Jarvis. That's all you need to worry about. With what else? Captain America, you really only have Captain America. But with Thor, you have Loki, you have the Warriors 3, you have Sif, you've got Kat Dennings now, you got Natalie Portman, you got Eric Selvig, and yes, they introduce a new character. That's 10 characters they have to juggle between. That's a little ridiculous. They should not introduce any more in the near future. Keep them out. I can only imagine how much of a headache it is for those writers, but otherwise I thought they handled the story really well. I mean, here's the thing, despite whatever complaints I brought up, I had a great time. It was a lot of fun. The sense of humor is still there. The fish out of water story that Thor has in the real world is still hilariously funny. And you get a sense of that too with Jane Foster in Asgard for the time being. And I thought it really really worked. Now, there are little things that if you really want to be a nitpicker, you could search out and you can find little issues that are going to bug you, which unfortunately, that to each their own. Like that, to just think of one off the top of my head, there's a scene where Thor takes the hammer, or Mjolnir, or whatever it's called, and he hangs it on a coat rack. And you know what? It was funny just to see him try to understand the coat rack. But at the same time, I know Mjolnir is supposed to be heavier than all heck, and that coat rack should not be able to hold up the hammer. But you know what? Whatever. It was a funny joke. I let it go, which is the attitude you got to keep here. If you're one of those purists, you know what? Just stick with the comic, because that's going to be what makes you happy. But if you want a fun experience, I thought Thor really did a great job. All right, and as for the presentation and special effects, like I said, it looks wonderful. It looks like one of the Lord of the Rings movies with a heavy dose of Star Wars, which really works. The ship design is great. The special effects are incredible still. I could watch Thor where the entire thing takes place in Asgard. In fact, please make that happen. You're literally cutting the characters in half that you have to worry about. You only have to worry about Thor, Loki, Sif, and the Warriors 3. Okay, a little more than half. That'd be like 6. But that's still better than 10. Seriously, just stay on Asgard next time, and I think it would be a much better show. Another thing I really want to hype up, the final fight is genius. I remember back in the Iron Man 3 review where I was talking about how awesome that one fight where the suit was flying one piece at a time to Tony and he had to make do with each piece as he got it. I thought it was a really imaginative scene. They do another something like that as far as it's an outside the box thinking style of fight where Thor is taking on Malekith or whatever his name is, the Dark Elf leader, and they're essentially fighting in an area with a whole bunch of portals, and they're porting from world to world to world to world in a continuing fight. And it actually makes it really special. I really enjoyed it. It's a very satisfying final fight. So I'm very curious. So I think you would enjoy that immensely. Let's see, as I prepare my notes here, I would watch it again, hands down. And as soon as it's on pre-order, I'm pre-ordering it on Amazon. So typically I would tell you to go buy it. In this case, I guess it's pre-order, but go watch it. Watch it, you'll enjoy it. I think you'll have a great time. So go. Just some talking points before they go, as there's been some controversy with this movie and the build that's been going on as far as Avengers 2, which will be Age of Ultron. Ultron is a pretty legendary villain in the world of Marvel, so people are very excited, but people feel that a little on the downside as far as the build for it. Like with Phase 1 of the Avengers, you definitely felt the build slowly go up there. And like at the end of Iron Man, when you see Samuel L. Jackson and he's like, I want to talk to you about the Avengers Initiative. Boom, that's when it clicked. Oh my God, we're gonna get an Avengers build. And every stinger built up to that moment until you, at the end of Captain America, where you see the first real teaser trailer for the entire movie. And it was done perfectly. I don't know if they're ever going to be able to get it that well again, but we haven't really seen it this time. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we haven't had Coulson yet. There is no Coulson. There's no involvement with S.H.I.E.L.D. actually either. I mean, maybe that was it. Maybe the fact that S.H.I.E.L.D. was in every single episode of every single movie, leading up to the Avengers, maybe that's why it felt particular. Or maybe it's because it was like when you saw Samuel L. or when you saw Coulson, that you immediately thought, oh my God, that's right, Avengers. And that's when it started getting your juices flowing. To be fair, and I'm going to defend the series, of course, I think they're building it up a different way, because the one thing that Iron Man 3 and Thor 2 have in common is we're seeing each character as reacting, or each character having to deal with the events of the Avengers, in which they had to, like, you see Loki paying for the crime that he committed in the Avengers. You see Thor come to realize that he has a new sense of responsibility thanks to it. Tony Stark feels vulnerable for the first time ever thanks to the events in the Avengers. I think that in and of itself is how they're building to it. You're seeing each of these characters having to deal with it, so that when Avengers 2 happens and they have to join up again, the question is, the first movie is, can they coexist? And I think the question to ask in the next Avengers movie will be, will they want to, or can they handle being together again? And at least that's what I think. I'm very interested to see what happens from here on. And admittingly, the stingers aren't really building up to Avengers 2, though there is a stinger in Thor Dark World that I think you'll want to pay attention to. Just a heads up, because I didn't know this and I missed out, but there are two stingers for Thor. One after the first brief moments of credits, and the last one is at the very end of it. They tricked me. I thought they only did one and I left with my wife, but no, there's two. So don't leave until the credits are done. Though the last one at the end is about as important to the story as Swarm, but who knows. But the one at the end the first one builds up to Guardians of the Galaxy, builds up that villain, which I won't spoil for you because it's a fun reveal, even though it feels pretty weird. It feels like we go from the show feeling like Lord of the Rings and Star Wars meeting up to it feeling like Lord of the Rings and Doctor Who. But check it out. It's a fun reveal. Plus, it does kind of build up a bit to Thanos. So there's that. Though Thanos won't be, as far as I can tell, he's not going to be in Avengers 2, or he's not going to be the big bad, I should say. But it is building up to him. He's sort of being built as an end boss. But I think that, anyway, in summary, that's how they're building up to Avengers 2. I think they're just showing you how the characters have had to deal with that and how it's affected them. And I think that to a point where it's like getting to a point where I don't know how they'll be able to coexist, because they freak each other out, it seems. On top of that, now what made Avengers cool was it was a situation that was so fantastic that it necessitated them working together, which really worked. But since Avengers, we've had an international terrorist group with Iron Man 3, which you could have made the argument the Avengers could have been needed for, but Tony Stark handled it. Then with Iron Man 3, with Thor Dark World, we had a second alien invasion, so to speak, dimensional invasion, I don't know. Oh, and which you could have made the argument that that the Avengers were needed, but Thor by himself was able to handle it. I really wonder what this is, whether we realize it or not, it's raising the bar for why they would need to join up again. So it's making me wonder, at the very least, what Ultron is going to do to necessitate them coming back together. So I'm very interested about that. Finally, this movie isn't doing as well as I would hope on the reviews. I still enjoyed it. Big thumbs up. But people are really taking it apart as far as reviews and whatnot, and I think it's a little unfair. I mean, is it the Avengers? No, but it's still a fun movie. I mean, this movie pretty much went down the laundry list of issues I had with the original Thor. You know, there wasn't enough Asgard, there wasn't enough on the other characters, there's could have had more of this, that, and the other. It actually answered all of them. There was more time with the characters, there was more time on Asgard, and it really worked for me, and I'm appreciative of it. But I think we're starting to get to the point now where the magic, so the luster's gone. We're no longer at a point, like, remember how when the first Iron Man movie came out and we're like, oh my god, these comic book movies can be awesome. And this continued on all the way through Avengers, and now we've sort of come to a point where we expect them to be like that. We expect it to be Avengers every single time, and that's not really fair. Avengers should be the absolute height of the peak of excitement, and then roller coaster down and build back up again. I'm not saying by roller coastering down, I'm not saying that it sucks. I'm just saying you should not expect it to be like Avengers again. But I think I think people forget sometimes that sometimes it's okay if it's just a fun movie to watch. It's okay if it's just a great experience. It's okay if it's like you see the movie and you're like, that was a great time. And it doesn't have to be Avengers each and every single time. It's great when it is, but it doesn't have to be. And I still say that Thor Dark World is incredible. Go see it. You're going to have a great time. All right, folks, thanks very much for joining me this week on Malc's Movie Review. We'll be back next week with a DVD. I promise, more splicey in the footage, and I'll see you next week.